14.18 is the patch that Worlds will be played on, so there are a lot of pro-centric changes on the way. Do you guys like the fact that Riot balances for pro play even if it affects certain champions' solo queue viability? For instance, right now Corki and Azir are both sub 46% win rate solo queue champs, but they're getting nerfed yet again due to pro. And are you sick of losing games from bad teammates? Well, at SkillCapped, we turn your frustrating losses into satisfying wins. Take our brand new Season 14 courses that teach you the secrets to winning as top laner, jungler, mid laner, AD carry, and support. Then pair that with our other new courses on how to counter OP top and mid laners, master your jungle clears, or check out our new Bronze to Diamond series. We even have new Season 14 courses on macro, wave control, trading, settings and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, low elo mistakes, and the list goes on. Then head over to our Smurf commentaries. Simply select the champion you want to master and get guides from challenger experts teaching how to play your champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. You're even guaranteed to have all your questions answered by that very same challenger expert. Our service really does work. That's why we offer a rank up guarantee. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below right now to get the rank you've always dreamed of. Riot's going to be tinkering with a couple of mage items for this patch, shifting some of the power around on them. Luden's will have its ability power increased by 5, cost of the item is going down by 50 gold, while ability haste is down by 5. If we're just going off of gold value alone here, 5 AP is worth 100 gold, while 5 haste is worth 250 gold. So even with the cost of Luden's going down by 50 gold, you're still losing 200 gold worth of stats from these changes, so gold efficiency wise, this is actually a nerf. Shadow Flame is being adjusted so that its ability power is going down from 120 to 115. Magic Pen is up, however, from 12 to 15. The bonus damage threshold is being increased from 35 to 40% of the enemy's max health. Damage over time spells will be receiving less of a damage amp when enemies are below 40% health, as they'll now get a 25% boost instead of 30%. So Magic Pen has a gold value of 46.15 per point, which means the addition of 3 Magic Pen is worth 138.45 gold. The 5 AP that you're losing is only worth 100 gold, and with the passive threshold getting buffed as well, this should be a net positive change for Shadow Flame. Storm Surge is going to have its Magic Pen boosted up from 10 to 15, so that's 231 gold worth of stats being added. Riot's taking away 3% movement speed though, which is equal to around 162 gold. Passives are getting buffed on Storm Surge as well, so these should be net positive changes for the item. Bloodthirster is going to be nerfed for this patch, with its lifesteal dropping from 18 to 15%. The level 8 shield value of Bloodthirster is also going down from 194 to 165, so rushing the item won't be as valuable. Misfortune and Draven were the two ADCs rushing Bloodthirster in recent patches, so they'll be hurt the most by these nerfs. Shield Bow is getting changed for this patch so that its passive shield strength will be lower for ranged champs, but it's going to be stronger for melee champs earlier in the game. This should end up as a slight buff to Yasuo and Yone, but will be a nerf to all ranged ADCs. There are more changes to Fleet for this patch, with its champion heal being increased for melee but reduced for ranged. Minion heal is going down for melee champs, but will be up for ranged. Movement speed from the rune is going up for melee, but will be unchanged for ranged. To prevent lane swapping from being as prevalent in the pro scene, there are a few changes being issued to the strength of turrets in the early game. Instead of dealing 75% less damage to towers for the first 5 minutes of the game, that's getting bumped up to 85% less damage. Permanent resist per destroyed tower plate is going up from 40 to 50. For 20 seconds after you take down a turret plate, the turret gains bonus resists, and those resists are being lowered from 45 per champ to 20 per champ. Moving on to all the top lane champion changes now, we have a buff to Gnar for 14.18, with his base AD being increased by 3. We just recently saw Ezreal lose 2 AD, and that ended up dropping his win rate by about 0.5%, so with Gnar gaining 3 AD, we're probably looking at a max of 1% coming out of this change. Fleet nerfs are going to have a negative impact on Gnar though, so in the grand scheme of things, he likely gains very little win rate for 14.18, if any at all. Considering Gnar has not been in a great spot as of recent, we don't see this buff being quite enough to move him up the tier list, so he's going to remain in the B tier. Jax will have some power added to his R for this patch, as the on-hit damage is going up, while the resists that you receive are also being increased. Buff should be enough to solidify Jax as a good A tier pick, as he's been on the fence between A and B tier for the past while now. A few very minor buffs are being issued to Jace, as he's going to receive an extra 5% on his melee Q slow. Ranged E movement speed is going to be increased by 5% at all ranks as well. Nothing significant enough here to push Jace up the tier list, so he'll continue to be rated as a B tier pick. Malphite is next in line for a buff, as his passive shield scaling is going to be increased from 9 to 10% of his max health. Malphite has actually been a pretty solid solo queue champ for a while now, so this buff is likely being issued to try and push him into being played more for pro. So S tier is where you'll find Mal on the tier list. Another tank is buffed for this patch, as we've got Shen, who will be receiving more scaling to his passive shield, as the bonus health scaling is up from 12 to 13%. The base shield is going down, but since Riot has these changes listed under the buff category, we should be able to assume that the scaling buff will outweigh the base buff. No movement for Shen on the tier list as a result of these changes, as he'll remain in the A tier. Nasus is getting nerfed for this patch. However, the nerfs are honestly more aimed at reducing his strength as a mid laner as opposed to top lane. E damage is what's being targeted, as it's dropping from 55 scaling to 215 to 50 scaling to 170. The damage per second from E is also going down from 11 scaling to 43 to 10 scaling to 34. So with the damage not actually dropping much at all in its first rank, top lane Nasus should be very minimally impacted by these nerfs. It's only if you're maxing E out first where you would feel the effects of this, which is what a lot of mid lane Nasus players are doing. Top Nasus maxes E last, so we don't expect his relative power level to be dropping that much, and he will remain in the S tier. Rumble has been nerfed so many times this season, and we have another round for 14.18. Q damage will be dropping, as the base is going down by 20 at rank 1, while the AP ratio is being lowered from 110 to 100%. E base damage will be taking a hit as well, going down by 10 at all ranks. So a lot less early game kill threat from Rumble in 14.18, and he will remain in the top lane C tier. So for the top lane tier list, we honestly don't have very much changing for 14.18. Many of the direct champion changes are very small, so the meta won't be shifting all that much. OP tier has been a little harder to craft for top lane as of recent because there just isn't a clear-cut OP top laner for solo queue. Garen is a champ that has been on the verge of OP in recent patches, so we're bumping him up for 14.18 as he's been performing incredibly well in the lower ranks and even seeing good success in high elo too. Generally, if Garen is being prioritized in high elo and actually winning a lot, it's good indication that the pig is a bit overtuned, as these more linear champs should in theory get punished harder by good players, but that's not the case right now with Garen. One other adjustment we will be making is dropping Aurora down to B tier, as she's getting directly nerfed, and then the changes to fleet should negatively influence her as well. With turrets becoming a little tankier early on, it should be a net nerf to ranged top lane champs. However, we'll have to see if the changes actually are enough to significantly impact the strength of them once they hit live servers. Jarvan is going to be one of the best solo queue junglers for 14.18, as his passive damage is getting a buff, going from 7 to 8% max health. Buff likely isn't quite enough to push Jarvan into that OP level, but we definitely see him as one of the stronger S tier junglers now. Viego is next in line for a buff, with his base AD going up from 57 to 60. There is a compensation nerf being thrown in though, with his Q bonus monster damage dropping from 20 to 15. Viego has been right on the fence of S tier for a while now, so with this buff, we'll be bumping him up for 14.18. Xin Zhao is the third jungler who's getting buffed, as his armor growth is going from 4.7 to 5. Q bonus damage per hit is up as well, from 16 scaling to 52 to 16 scaling to 68. So nothing too crazy for Xin here, but similar to Jarvan, he's actually been performing very well in solo queue even before these buffs, so we'll be placing Xin in the S tier for 14.18. Ivern has been a pretty contested jungler in pro play as of late, so Riot's toning him down this patch, with his E shield dropping by 10 at all ranks, and the slow on E is going down as well by 5%. With these nerfs, we'll be dropping Ivern down one tier, going from S into A. Lilia has been way too good for way too long, so we actually have some meaningful nerfs this patch, as her passive monster cap is going from 70 scaling to 100 down to 65. Our sleep duration is dropping as well, from 2 scaling to 2.5 seconds down to 2 seconds at all ranks. There's a chance these nerfs are not enough to drop Lilia out of S tier, but realistically, we see her falling off quite a bit in priority, so we'll be moving her from S into A tier. Despite just getting buffed in 14.16, Riot is taking that buff completely back for 14.18, as Vi will be losing 5 damage on her Q at all ranks. For solo queue specifically, Vi has not been all that impressive over the past while, so this is definitely more of a pro-skewed nerf. The original buff from 14.16 didn't actually end up increasing Vi's solo queue win rate at all, so taking back the change, she shouldn't be that much weaker, and we'll be leaving her in the B tier. So if we have a look at the complete jungle tier list, OP tier will be staying the same as where we had it last patch, with Amumu, Nocturne, and Udyr on top. Definitely watch out for Jarvan and Xin Zhao for this patch, as they've already been very good solo queue champs prior to their buffs, so if you like the more aggressive early game junglers, this meta will be for you. Gwen jungle is an off meta pick that we have been seeing a bit more of as of late, so if you're looking for a new AP jungler to try, then she's definitely worth a shot. Skirmish strength of Gwen, especially once she gets level 6, is absolutely incredible, and you'll be able to catch the enemy off guard very often, as they won't be accustomed to playing against Gwen. For mid lane this patch, it's mainly nerfs that are being issued, but one lucky champ who's in line for a buff is Ahri. Ahri will be receiving more damage on her E at max rank, as it's going from 200 to 240, while the AP ratio on the spell is being increased from 60 to 75%. 40 damage at max rank does sound amazing, but we have to keep in mind that E is the spell you generally max last on Ahri. Surprisingly enough though, E max second actually has a slightly higher win rate than W max second over the past patch, so it will be interesting to see if this buff is enough to push players towards maxing E second now. now. If this does end up being the case, then the buff is actually quite nice, as you get the extra 40 damage at level 13, whereas if you were maxing E out last, then the full buff wouldn't kick in until level 18. For now, we're going to be leaving Ahri in the mid lane A tier, as we'll have to see if Emax second does become viable before potentially moving her into S for the mid-patch tier list. Hui is getting a buff for this patch, as his WW shield strength for allies is going from 50 to 75%, so a bit of added utility for Hui in 14.18, but the change likely is not enough to significantly boost his strength, so we'll be leaving him in the A tier. Aurora is going to receive a few nerfs for this patch, with her R jump max distance being reduced from 450 to 250. R wall jump forgiveness is going down as well from 700 to 450. R duration is getting hit 2, dropping from 3 scaling to 4 seconds to 2 scaling to 3 seconds. Aurora had been just barely holding on to an S tier spot over the past patch, so with this nerf, she'll definitely be falling into A tier. It's that time of year again when Azir gets nerfed for pro play while holding a 46% win rate in solo queue. This time, it's his R that Riot will be nerfing, as the base damage is going down and the AP ratio takes a dip too. Nothing else really to say other than you should be staying away from Azir in solo queue if you really want to climb the fastest. Another mid lane champ you're going to want to avoid at all costs for this patch is Corki. Corki is even worse for solo queue than Azir right now, but is losing 20 damage on his Q at max rank due to the champ still being played in pro. C tier is where you'll find Corki on the mid lane tier list. The Lissandra buffs from 14.17 ended up providing her with a little more power than Riot had wanted, so they're shaving some strength off for this patch by reducing her Q AP ratio from 85 to 75%. Change shouldn't be all that bad, and Lissandra will remain a good solo queue pickup, but we will be moving her out of OP tier and into S. So here's how we have the mid lane tier list constructed for this patch, as the OP tier will consist of Vex, Naafiri, and Sylas. Sylas is getting a bump up for this patch, as the nerf from 14.17 really didn't affect him at all, and he's been thriving a ton since the 14.16 buffs. Nasus mid is going to be impacted quite a bit for this patch due to the E nerf, as E max will not be as powerful anymore. For solo queue, the champ likely drops to a power level where he's really not that worth it to prioritize, as we'll be moving Nasus from A into B tier. Garen mid, on the other hand, who we have seen pulled out in pro as of late, is not nerfed at all for 14.18, so it's definitely a pick we would recommend you play if you're looking for some easy elo. Looks like Riot's sneaking in a Jinx buff for this patch with the release of Arcane not too far out. Jinx really doesn't need this buff, but Riot likely wants to make sure that she's in a strong state for the next few months. Attack speed growth is what's being adjusted, as it's going up from 1 to 1.4. Jinx has been right in behind Jhin and Miss Fortune over the past patch, and with both champs becoming weaker for this patch, we can see Jinx on a similar power level to them, so we are going to be bumping her into the OP tier. We may be a little too optimistic here and could have to push Jinx back into S for the mid-patch tier list, but nevertheless, with the way everything is shaping out, Jinx will be a top 5 solo queue ADC for 14.18. Samira is going to receive a buff for 14.18, and it's a bit of a weird one, as her Q-AD ratio is going up, but it's only being increased for the first 4 points that you put in the spell, as it's staying the same at max rank. So a bit of an early game boost for Samira here, which isn't all that bad, as her level 6 all-in power will be getting stronger. With Bloodthirster and Shield Bow becoming weaker, Samira will actually lose power this patch though in the later stages of the game. All in all, we do think Samira ends up gaining strength for this patch, as there are a few ADCs right around her current power level that are being nerfed, so we'll be bumping Samira up into the A tier. It's all nerfs from here on out for the ADC role, as Miss Fortune is first up with her base AD dropping from 55 to 53. It's more so the Bloodthirster nerfs that will lay a dent in Miss Fortune's solo queue strength though, as the item won't be as strong of a rush. As a result, MF will be losing her OP tier slot, as we're dropping her into S. A few Smolder nerfs are on the way, with his Q damage dropping by 5 at all ranks, and the AP ratio on his Q is being removed. W glob damage is taking a hit as well, being lowered by 5 at all ranks. Smolder has been on the weaker side of things for solo queue over the past patch, so these nerfs won't be helping out his cause, and we'll be dropping him down into the ADC C tier. Riot just buffed Varus last patch, but they are not wasting any time in taking some of that power back. Turns out lethality has become too strong for the elite levels of play, so Varus's Q-AD ratio will be lowered by 20% at all ranks. E-AD ratio is dropping as well from 110 to 100%. So just like Smolder, Varus will be sitting at the bottom of the solo queue tier list for 14.18, being placed in the C tier. We've got some nerfs to Zeri's passive for this patch, as base damage is dropping from 90 scaling to 200 to 75 scaling to 160. Max health damage from passive will also be lowered from 1 scaling to 15% to 1 scaling to 11%. So a pretty big damage hit here to Zeri, and she's going to be following suit with Varus and Smolder, joining them in the C tier. Ziggs has been showing up a ton in the bot lane as of late, so Riot's nerfing him pretty substantially this patch. His tower taking power is what's being hit the hardest, as passive damage to structures is dropping from 250 to 175%. Normal passive damage is also going down from 50 scaling to 400 to 35 scaling to 280. AP ratio on passive is also down from 125 to 87.5%. So just a massive hit to Ziggs Ziggs passive here, and this should kill a lot of his strength as a bot laner. It's tough to say exactly how harsh this nerf will land, but we can't see Ziggs being any higher than B tier now, so we're dropping him down there. But if the nerf hits harder and we need to further adjust into C, we'll do that for the mid-patch tier list. So ADC is the one role in which the tier list actually looks significantly different for this patch, as we will have changes all around. OP tier will now consist of Jinx and Jhin. Kai'Sa is moving up into S tier, as she'll gain a good chunk of indirect strength this patch due to the Bloodthirster nerfs, fleet nerfs, and just many other ADCs getting nerfed too. We'll have to see exactly how the fleet changes land when they hit live servers, so for now, we are leaving Jhin in the OP tier, but that could change for mid-patch if fleet changes do end up hurting him. Pro play has really turned the ADC tier list into something that we have never really seen in the past, as there are just so many C tier picks now. Usually there are only 2 or 3 champs max in the C tier for ADC, but right now we've got 6. This likely only lasts for one patch though, because this is the patch that Worlds is being played on, so for 14.19, it's likely that Riot ends up buffing a bunch of these C tier ADCs because the changes won't impact Pro. Lulu is the only support that will be buffed for this patch, as her passive damage per bolt is going up from 3 scaling to 37 to 5 scaling to 39. Pretty minor buff here overall, so we won't be adjusting Lulu anywhere in the tier list, as she will remain in the S tier. Leona will not be as tanky for this patch, as her base armor is what's being targeted, dropping from 47 to 43. So it's interesting because this is the same nerf that Riot gave Pyke last patch. However, Pyke's win rate did not even drop at all as a result of the nerf. Leona's going to be in the thick of things a little more often than Pyke though, just due to how her kit works, so we suspect this nerf likely does affect her more than it did for Pyke. Leona had just been barely holding on to an S tier ranking over the past patch, so with this nerf we're going to be dropping her into A. Maokai's zone control is going to be nerfed for this patch, as his E cooldown will be increased by 2 seconds at all ranks. The duration that saplings will last in a brush is also dropping, with the bonus health scaling on the duration going from 2.5 to 1.5% max health. So Maokai is going to be dropping out of the S tier as well and joining Leona down in A. We've got a third melee support who will be nerfed for this patch, as Rel is going to be losing some strength on her E, with the initial movement speed going from 9 scaling to 15% to 9 scaling to 12%. E max movement speed is down as well, from 24 scaling to 40% to 24 scaling to 32%. A lot of high elo Rel players have been maxing their E out first lately, so this nerf definitely puts a dent in that strategy. W max first should gain some priority back for this patch, and if you're maxing out W first, this E nerf definitely doesn't hurt that bad. For now, we won't be pushing Rel further down the tier list, as she'll remain in A. So on the grand scale of things, you can expect for the upper echelon of the support meta to remain intact for 14.18. This means Poppy and Senna will continue to take home the OP tier slots as the most powerful solo queue supports. We're definitely a bit shocked that Senna did not receive any sort of nerf for this patch, so definitely take advantage of her while you can, because it's highly likely that in 14.19 she does receive some sort of change. We're definitely seeing a shift away from melee supports now though, and back towards enchanters and mage supports. S tier for support now is mostly comprised of enchanters, as Poppy is really the only more durable melee support that is left in a really powerful spot after 14.18. And this is only because Poppy is yet to really see a big spike in play, despite being a very strong pick. So if her play rate does begin to spike more in the coming patches, she's definitely getting nerfed too. Other than Poppy, Thresh is now the go-to melee support for solo queue, with so many other melee supports being directly nerfed recently. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap up everything for our 14.18 tier list update. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.